Welcome to the Disability Myth, the podcast where we explore the realities of disability with handsomeness, humility, and hamminess. My name's Dominic, and I was born with a fatal neuromuscular condition called spinal muscular atrophy. My co-host, Uriel, and I tackle serious issues, but we don't take ourselves too seriously.
SMA and boats. How did that go?
SMA and boats?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, boats are just not as wheelchairs. We're here to share stories, break down barriers, and remind everyone that we're not so different. So hit subscribe and let's shed light on some myths. Warning: this episode includes a brief mention of suicidal ideation. Please take care while listening and feel free to skip this episode if needed. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available. In the US, call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. In the words of SpongeBob, I'm ready. That wasn't cringe at all. Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of The Disability Myth. I'm, of course, your handsome, your humble, your hammy host, Dominic Trevathan. And alongside me, as always, the equally...
Chris Hemsworth.
Definitely. I am sitting next to Thor.
Yeah, in the flesh.
Yes. Where's your hammer? What is it? Alpha? I forget. Oh, okay, yeah. That's definitely not just a water thermos, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Flask, hydro flask. And yeah, so alongside me, as always, the equally handsome, humble, and hammy Thor. Today we have a fan favorite returning. Cue Return of the King memes. Welcome back, Victor McConnell.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, man, we're super excited. And he brought along with him a new friend, his mom, Lori. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're super stoked to talk to you guys and get to know you better, Lori, and just go over some topics that we didn't get to talk about the first time around with Victor. So for those that may have not seen the first episode we did with Victor, he is a very talented pianist, a musician. He writes music. He is a photographer. He is an IT consultant as well. And he just does it all. So
Yeah.
super excited to talk to you more. And with that being said, before we kind of jump into our icebreakers, Lori, do you mind telling us like what you do for work and stuff?
Sure. So right now I'm working at the Elverhoy Museum of History and Art in Solvang. And then that's 4 days a week. And then 1 day a week I work at our computer shop in Buellton. And before I started working at the Elverhoy, I was the shop technician there.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That's why you look familiar, because I remember I've seen you before. And I've been to that computer store. I'm like,
That's
you look
funny,
very
yeah.
familiar. That's right. Yeah, now I remember. Okay. It's all coming together.
Very cool. Very cool.
Okay, really cool. I think the Overhoy Museum is really sick, actually. I like going there every now and then. It's nice. Do they
It's a
still
cool
do-
place for sure.
Yeah. So they have a lot of cool pieces there. We should go there one day.
No,
Have you been?
I don't think so.
Oh, we should go.
Maybe
There
a
you
long
go.
time ago when I was a kid. But yeah.
I know they do the field trips with the kids still, right?
Yep.
Like the Slovene school.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so first icebreaker we're asking you all the same icebreaker questions that we asked Victor because that seemed only appropriate. That being said, you're held at gunpoint.
I got rid of that part.
Oh,
but
okay.
I mean, okay, we could add it. Yeah.
You are not held at gunpoint.
Wait, did Victor, did you get the held at gunpoint part?
I was held at gunpoint, yes.
Okay,
Okay,
he's held at
I'm
gunpoint.
pretty sure, yeah.
You're held at gunpoint by a magical wizard. He asks you, if you're going to be turned into a hot dog, and that's how you're going out. He's going to eat you in hot dog form. But he gives you the choice, the freedom to determine what type of dog you are. And so, with that being said, you must pick your hot dog meat or wiener meat, as Uriel likes to say.
Hey, that was the one time with Teresa. Relax. I didn't know how to describe it to
You
her.
can pick your bun, your condiments, any toppings. So, what type of hot dog will you go out as?
Okay, so my one of my passions is my Danish heritage, and in Denmark, hot dogs are a big thing.
Hmm.
And the hot dogs are not like hot dogs we get here. They have way too much red coloring, and that's why I think we can't get them. And they have a very crispy casing,
Hmm.
and they're topped with remoulade, which is similar to tartar sauce, and cucumbers in vinegar and crispy onions. And so that is how I would go out as a Danish hot dog.
Oh yeah.
That's so, I mean,
Yeah, have you ever had one?
I've never had one.
Really? Sometimes they top it like I put sauerkraut on mine, but I don't know how Danish that is. I like the sauerkraut.
I like I like the she didn't know the question going in, but she had an answer ready.
Well, it's it's kind of like a great little icebreaker if you go on a date, I guess. Take out the wizard gunpoint thing because it's like, oh, like are you more responsive to nostalgia, or like what's like guilty pleasure, like spicy food? I don't know. It's kind of exciting. It's kind of cool.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, but it's like but the crispy onions, those are a game changer.
Yeah.
You should try. Those are so good.
They are so good.
Okay. You are trapped in the last piece of media that you consumed. This can be a book, a film, a video game. So, what's your situation?
Oh man, last piece of media. That would be Facebook. I don't want to be trapped in Facebook. That would be hell.
I never even thought about that. Social media.
Oh God.
I'd be stuck on Instagram.
Yeah, but then you're raising like a wild like question. Like, would you be locked in that reel or that post, like the reality of that reel or post, or just like
Like just
on the web?
scrolling
Yeah, I don't
through a
know.
feed.
Gosh, I don't
Can
know.
can you go to Reels or are you just stuck in like your friend's feed?
Gosh, I don't know. Oh, well, like I'm cooked. Mine was still Dark Souls 3, so I'm doomed.
So the last game you played was Dark Souls 3 both
Yeah,
times we asked
I
this
woke up
question.
at like 9:30 and I did some Ring City and now I'm here. I'm like, uh-oh. That's bad.
I think actually I'm stuck in the same I'm once again in Ark, so yeah.
The dinosaur, you
Yeah.
already know no better. Dinosaurs, hee hee.
Yep.
Oh gosh.
Okay. I think Victor last time you had said Star Trek, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it would be Futurama. That's what I've been watching
Oh,
lately.
Futurama's good though.
Oh,
Yeah, Futurama's really it's a show that's aged pretty well.
I always do the Professor Farnsworth impersonations with my other friend while we're talking or catching up. Good news, everyone.
Oh,
Yeah.
with Eric?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I like Futurama.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah, Futurama or Star Trek would both be infinitely better than being stuck in the hell of Facebook.
Oh
Yes,
gosh.
indubitably.
Hmm.
And speaking of Futurama, if you could go back in time and give a piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Ooh, boy, that is a tough one. Piece of advice to my younger self. When people are crappy to you, it's usually not about you.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my advice.
I feel that.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Especially like yeah, because sometimes sometimes it could be projection maybe.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
especially because I think a lot of times people's past experiences, their trauma, gets projected onto new experiences and newer people to them,
Yeah.
and that just sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like we talk about this sometimes. It's like empathy currently, like in modern America, because it's a lot of doom scrolling. You see a lot of negativity and a lot of like projection,
Yeah.
but like we do our best to like be positive
Yeah.
and like like that stuff is like wild right now.
I want to share the story.
Oh yeah.
Shout out Mikey, our friend.
Oh yeah,
We
shout out Mikey. Manchester Mikey.
Manchester Mikey. We hung out with Mikey a couple
Mikey
of weeks ago,
LaMotta.
and you know, he was visiting from out of town and out of country really, and we got breakfast, hung out for a bit, and we were talking just about how shitty everything is.
Yeah. Yeah. We're kind of, yeah, dumping. It's like, man.
Venting,
Yeah, yeah.
and he was venting too, of course, and we were just talking, and then he's like, "So, what are you guys looking forward to? What's a good thing going
No, no,
on
he
in your
said like
life?"
list like positive stuff.
Yeah,
And then we were bewildered.
and
It's
we were
like,
just kind of
oh
taken
man.
aback, like,
Yeah.
"Huh?"
Like, oh shoot, I don't know. Like feeding Dominic eggs. It's pretty fun.
Watching Full Metal Alchemist.
That's so good. Yeah. A Brotherhood to be specific.
Get sis. But yeah, okay, cool. So those are our silly little icebreakers.
All right.
And now that we've inducted you via them, we will get into the nitty-gritty, so to speak. And Victor told me that when you were younger, you had an accident and ended up losing part of your hand. Can you share
Yes.
with us a little bit about that experience?
Okay, sure. So, when I was 4, I had an accident with a tractor lawnmower with a real blade on the front. The neighbor guy who was a teenager was mowing their lawn, and I was playing on the lawn with my eyes closed. Not the best choice, but I was 4. And he hit me with the mower and couldn't figure out how to turn off the blade um, or lift the mower up. And I lost half of my left hand, and I have some large scars on my legs.
Wow, he's
Victor
like,
wants me to show you. See, so
oh, okay,
I have, thumb, index finger, half of my middle finger.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Do do you have memories like before that occurred versus after, like just doing general things, like picking stuff up and how it's different?
No, actually, I don't, and no one's ever asked me that, and that's an interesting question. So, I think because I was so young, no.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. My only memories of I think pre 5 or 4 years old are playing with army men. So or like building Lego stuff.
Hmm.
Very
Oh gosh.
oh, and playing the OG Spider-Man game on the PS2.
Ah, fun.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that the one with the QuickTime events?
Yeah.
Uh,
That's back before when I could actually I had the mobility to do quick time events.
yeah, no,
Mhm.
you still could. We just have to find like a. We have to hook up like a fancy trigger or something.
Yeah.
You know.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's a wild story.
Hmm.
Do you kind of feel like growing up without that hand may have changed your outlook? Not that hand, but I mean like half of the hand, I should say. Do you think it changed your outlook on things and how you go about your day to day? But it seems like it was kind of just normal to you, right? Like it happened at such a young age, you don't remember before.
I don't remember before, but I honestly did not realize how profound of an impact everything had on me until like the last 3 years.
Really? Why's that?
Boy. All right. This is like a therapy dump. So
Love it.
I have always felt or realized that I don't feel or think like regular people. I'm just
Mhm.
going to, regular people for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
And I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about this book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, that's a classic one.
It's
That's a good one. That's a quoted one.
Yeah, and so some of the things they were talking about with that book was like, oh, that really resonates with me. And so I bought the book and it was like, oh, this explains everything. And I was just so blown away and just had no, I had no idea up until that point how profoundly my experience changed me. Because after my accident, you know, my physical injuries healed and I just went on and everyone else just went on. Um, and we didn't back then, this was like my accident was in 1968, and none of that trauma research had been done.
Yeah.
And so we just had no idea. And, therapy for little kids wasn't really a thing unless you were, you know, starting fires and hurting animals. And I wasn't doing
Yeah.
any of those things. So, yeah, that was an intense realization.
That's interesting. When you say you kind of feel like you go about things different than quote unquote normal people, can you get into more of the specifics of that? And let me know if I'm pressing too hard. You don't.
Yeah, no, so like I worry about my health more than other people. Like if someone has something wrong with them, I'd be like, oh, I've had some of those symptoms. Or in general, I have a lot of anxiety, um, like about bad things happening, or I tend to catastrophize. Like if something goes a little wrong, my head just jumps to like the worst possible conclusion. That sort of thing.
Uriel does that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, no, I think, yeah, you've done it too. I feel like everybody's done it to
Yeah.
some extent. When you're sick, most people can relate to it in the fact that like, oh, when you have the flu or a common cold, you don't, you start to come with the reality that like, oh, there are some things that I can't physically do.
Mhm.
But, it's just a cold, it's a fever, you get over it, and then you go back to normal. But for some people, like, whether it be chronic pain, or for me, it was like a double pinched nerve, whatever, it kind of like really just switches your psychology,
Mhm.
where it's like all of a sudden you're thinking about the things you can't do. And then you're just like focusing on the things that you can't do this. Well, if I do that, I might run the risk of hurting myself more. Like, yeah, it's like that kind of thing. And like that's
Mhm.
understandable. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
is very much like a trauma response. Like your body feels uncomfortable, so you don't want to do anything that's more uncomfortable.
Mhm. You don't want to
Mhm.
risk it.
Yeah, so you're in like this like paralyzed state almost where you
Yeah.
don't want to take risks, and it
Yeah.
affects like your like the way you go about things
Mhm.
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
very
can
very
say
relatable.
we may get into this topic later, but when it comes to things like chronic pain, uh, my back has, well, I had my surgery over a decade now, and it's just slowly been getting worse. But there's times where when my back really hurts, I get afraid to be like, is this like gonna heal back to where it just was, or I'm like in a new set of like a new normal?
Yeah,
And that
Yeah.
kind of stuff uh, is scary.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, so like what she touched on is like very real, very realistic, and it's like a lot of people don't realize it isn't even, not necessarily like physical disabilities like dom like mental disabilities, or whether it be like things like substance abuse and whatnot, where people are kind of like, oh well, my body's jacked up from like substance abuse. Is this, like you said, the new normal? Like, oh, can I risk getting sick? Like, and like, it's like all these, and
Mhm.
it very much affects like your psychology and the way you go about things.
It does. And just to kind of add on to that point, uh, I feel like I have extreme firsthand experience with this,
Yeah.
given my SMA. It's a degenerative disease. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with reference to the QuickTime events in OG Spider-Man on PS2, I can no longer do the QuickTime events on video games as easily, at least, as I used to be able to. And so, uh, I have I have, we'll call them canon moments, where I'll be playing a game. The one that sticks to mind is I was playing God of War 3 when I was like
That's like a notorious one.
I was playing God of War 3 when I was 12, maybe 11. And for those that are not familiar, the God of War series, the originals were infamous
It's like quick time
for,
quick time event simulator.
yeah, and for those that don't know what QuickTime events are, essentially there will be a scene playing out in the video game, a cutscene, and in order to progress without quote unquote losing or dying, you have to hit the buttons that pop up on the screen with, really fast reflexes
Like
Mhm.
in rhythm
and
sometimes.
tap them like
Yeah.
extremely fast.
Yeah,
And
picture
so,
like kids in an arcade back in the day, Mortal Kombat, the button
Yeah.
mashers, just like
hmm
going
yeah,
Oh
ham.
my gosh.
Yep.
exactly. And I remember playing that, I forget which fight it was, but I couldn't progress because I couldn't do the quick time event. And so you have those moments where you're just like, okay, as you said, Victor, is this my new normal?
Hmm.
I'm gonna have to have somebody around willing to help me with the quick time events when I play God of War now. And
I
that's
did.
just, yeah.
I noticed something interesting when I was doing physical therapy, which was, um, a lot of the people who are there are doing something. Well, it's part of a gym, so there's people there who are actively working to try to get better, to better themselves, to build muscle, things like that. And
Yeah.
I was there to ensure that things wouldn't get worse. So it was kind of a difference. I wasn't there to make things better. It was to
Right.
prevent things from getting worse or slow down the worse, the speed in which things would get worse naturally. So,
Yeah.
um,
That was my experience of physical therapy as well. Uh,
Yeah.
I haven't gone in a while just for a multitude of reasons, including me being lazy. But um, when I did go for a while there, talking about the psychology of your brain and how seeing other people progress versus you just maintaining, it's um it's a weird phenomenon because
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to trick your brain into thinking there's a point to going in and doing what you are doing. Um, Regardless of how intensive or boring or stressful it may be. And for me, just I think setting minor goals was really important and helpful. I worked with my therapist on um, little goals that we could set for myself. And one of those was, you know, maintaining my ability to sit upright without support. I always joked around when I was younger, like, oh, I want a six pack. And it's just because there's this weird thing in the disability community. I feel like I've always noticed is that I think they call it quad gut, and it's really common among people with paraplegia, especially, where you're not like standing up, you're not active, you're not getting around doing stuff, and you get a little bit of a beer belly, especially I do because I actually drink beer once in a while.
Mhm.
And I always wanted a six pack. I never wanted that. And so anyways, made it my goal to, you know, I know I wouldn't get a six pack, but I didn't want, like that big old belly from just being not active at all. And
Mhm.
so I said, okay, well, little goal, if I can sit on this table without support for a few minutes at a time, then I'll call it a day. And that was a good day. And yeah, long way of saying it's about setting smaller, achievable goals, I think, is really important to the psychology of it all.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting because I mentioned it in the last podcast, but for the most part, especially like you and I, Dominic, we grew up in the same kind of environment as all of our peers, so we think similarly to our peers.
Hmm.
And but then we end up in settings like, let's say, physical therapy, where we are objectively not treated like our peers would be.
Hmm.
Um, and that can be a hard thing to come across. And then, there's that saying, it's something like comparison is the uh,
Thief of
what is it? Comparison is the theft of joy, something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And you end up in those scenarios where it's very hard to kind of train your brain that this is what you need to be doing. Not Don't try to look at what the person next to you is doing and what their goals are.
Yeah.
You both are trying to, improve something, but we're not there to build muscle mass or to reach a personal record of how much weight we could lift. It's
Or get a
uh,
six pack. Yeah.
yes. But yeah, those are some of those scenarios where you are put into a situation that makes you feel different or makes you aware of how different you are, where there's like this kind of you diverge from your mental state to your physical state.
Yeah. And I think a very a reality is as we get older, things tend to get harder. And I was wondering, is it like the anxiety, all these things, like they kind of compound on each other because missing half of a hand, do you feel like like subconsciously you're at a higher risk in case you were to fall over or something were to happen, and that's kind of contributes to that anxiety, and it's kind of like, oh, it's just like, oh gosh, what if,
It was more like when you're a child, you don't think about dangerous things
yeah.
or you don't think about how something bad could happen to you. But since something did happen to me that was very traumatic, I was well aware that things are dangerous and that adults can't always protect you.
Oh, I see.
So that's where my thinking was.
I see. Yep.
You know,
That
it's like
that makes sense. Yeah.
like for example, going on a ride at the fair. It's supposed to be safe. It's usually safe, but if I was afraid of something like that, no amount of adult convincing would convince me that it would be okay.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
so it was like um I knew that something that seemed safe and okay could be not safe and not okay.
Oh, that makes sense because you were
Mhm.
just you were just a child minding your own business.
Yeah.
Like here comes
Hmm.
a lawnmower, and it was very
Yeah.
traumatic. And now
Who
you're
knows what could happen?
yeah. So even though I understand because it's like you're in even when you're in your a safe space,
Hmm.
the traumatic event happened after a safe space,
Yeah.
and then okay, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, because it's like shoot, it's like yeah, it's very eye-opening. Thank you for sharing. Wow. Because I feel like a lot of people might not realize they have something similar. Wow. Yeah.
Okay, now
Yeah.
I want to ask about raising Victor with that in mind. You know, Victor is very, as we said in our little notes here, he's just nonchalant. Like, So what? I have missing an arm, like potato potato, you know, and of course we appreciate that about him. Do you feel like your experiences, your kind of mindset, everything that we just talked about had a kind of impact on his attitude about his differences?
Well, let's start with this. This is interesting because I think I actually learned this recently because we were talking about it. But I asked I asked a question that's something like, because I was adopted, um, what was it any consideration compared to like any of the other kids? And he said something like there was no other kids.
Hmm.
So I got it in my head when Victor's sister was 2 that we should consider adopting a child. We'd kind of talked about it. Victor's dad and I both have adoption in our family. And at the time, you could basically look look at kids available for adoption on the internet. And I started looking and I thought, it would be really cool to adopt a kid with a so-called disability like mine because, I would have experience with that. And, kids with so-called disabilities, they have a harder time getting adopted.
Yeah.
And I saw Victor's picture on the internet, and there was just something about him, and we contacted the agency that was placing him, and they sent us a video of Victor when he was probably 9 months old, and he was so cute. And they had him, the facilitator had him on like a changing table. And Victor was just like scooting around, trying to get off, pounding on everything, big smile on his face. And it was like, oh, there he is. That's our kid. And that's how it started. And yeah, so my thinking was I would be a good parent for a kid with a physical difference. And in the initial information that we got about Victor, it said he was missing his left hand. And it turns out that the word for hand and arm in Russian are the same. So it was, we were kind of surprised that he was missing his entire arm. And it turns out he's also missing
Like the whole shoulder.
his whole shoulder. But by then it was too late. We were committed.
Locked in.
Locked in. Locked in. Yep.
That's interesting. Um, yeah, I wanted to ask some questions about the adoption process. It's just we had so many other kind of topics we planned on discussing, and no, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really cool story. Uh, I don't know what, I guess I thought that Victor was like the first one you adopted.
He
I guess.
was, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Danielle's our biological daughter.
Okay, I see, I see.
Hmm.
What, and then he told me that he has two siblings that also had some type of mutations or something.
Yeah. So um it was about 6 years after we adopted Victor that we found out he had a biological brother and a biological sister.
Yeah,
And his biological brother was born with an extra thumb.
right,
And his sister, um, she was like missing a tooth.
right.
Like it just never came in.
So was it like the same kind of line of thinking there?
No.
You're just like, no,
Mm-mm.
I just want his siblings to be with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of like, and this sounds selfish, but I could not live with myself knowing that Victor had siblings and not having them be together
Hmm.
because his brother would have gone to Finland and we would never, you know, have any contact with him. And his sister just would have aged out of the orphanage system, and that's never a good thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, Victor's sister was 10 when we adopted her, and his brother was almost 4.
That's cool. It's very cool.
Yeah.
It's so wholesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
It was pretty messy, but we've survived it.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. Um, were there any days, and anyone, either one of you can answer this. Were there any days where, Victor, you were just like annoyed or pissed off or frustrated with your lack of an arm and like talked about it with mom? Like any conversations about your differences like that you can recall stand out?
I don't know if there's any specific conversations that I can recall prior to my surgery. I know after my surgery, there was kind of like a dark period because my perspective was, you know, just a deep depression. It was kind of like here I have one arm and all this stuff, and then on top of that, now I'm in, physical pain, and that was a problem. That's something that
Mhm.
would come up. But before, I don't know. There's stuff like being bullied at school that would, come up, stuff
Oh
like
my
that.
God, I wanted to kill all those kids. I still do. Victor won't tell me their names because he's afraid I'll do something about it.
Yeah, I need to keep my mom,
That was
keep
in
her out
high
of jail.
school. Yeah, keep me out of jail. Thank you. But we did talk about some things like Victor decided he was going to do the monkey bars,
Oh, sure, yeah.
and he would come home and talk about how he tried this and that. But by this time,
Oh, teachers did
okay,
not like it.
oh well, that's too bad. So one of the first things Victor learned how to say in English is, I do it myself. And we learned very quickly that there was no point in trying to think of a way for Victor to do something because he was going to do it his own way and he was going to think of something. So there were very, very few things that Victor couldn't figure out how to do by himself. But the monkey bars were a real challenge. So he would ask for tips and stuff. And I'd say, just, you know, get some momentum and swing towards the next bar and let go and grab it. So
Oh,
I'm,
I had the opposite thought. I was thinking like, oh, what if you like got enough momentum, did like a half swing and use your leg to like grab on the downfall?
That's
Some like Simone Biles type beat.
oh, speaking of quick time events. Oh my God. Yeah, like I don't think I could do that. I think I'd die. Oh gosh. Like, oh no.
but
Oh,
yeah, Victor has pretty much, if Victor wants to do something, he's gonna figure out a way to do it. And it will very often not be something that other people would have thought of.
Yeah. What is the saying? Something breeds innovation.
a necessity.
Necessity breeds innovation. Yes.
And necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Yes. Even
Yeah,
better.
Mm-hmm.
that's the one. Yeah.
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
the one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that. It's helpful too when you have people in your life that are there to support you though too. Uh, I always had a similar attitude despite, my disorder being degenerative. And uh, one of the things that stands out to memory, I was getting too weak to raise my hand growing up in grade school. And for reference, this is about as good as I can do now at raising my
Mm-hmm.
hand. So asking a question in class was problematic.
Hmm.
And one day my dad, he got like a ruler and he taped a little flag to it, and I could just pick up the ruler and wave the like flag, and that's how I raised my hand.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Mm,
stuff like that.
Your dad was wild. I like it.
mm, mm.
This
That
might
is
be an interesting topic, unless you have a question, but I don't know how to segue into it as cleanly as possible. But in school, they wanted you to do the typing classes. Or what was it like going to school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, it's actually no, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I was kind of similar to Victor in that if there was something I couldn't do, I would try and figure out, my own way of doing it. But when I was in high school, I was friends with the guidance counselor, and they had a person come in who was from the county, and um, they offered like different types of services, and they pestered me relentlessly to get services for learning how to type.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm good. There are plenty of other kids who need help, and their issues are a lot more serious than mine. So basically, stop bugging me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I can type. I'm not very fast, but I I can type reasonably.
Yeah. Yeah. When
I have a funny story.
yeah.
So Victor's dad and I met when we were 12, going to confirmation class, and Kevin's mom was the assistant to the pastor, and it took her a long time to notice my hand. But when she did finally notice it, her first thought was, at least she'll be able to diaper a baby.
Wow. That's a
That's,
crazy thing to say.
yeah, pretty
That is
funny,
a
huh?
say.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was kind of par for the course for her, though.
What is that experience like now that you mention it? When people see or realize like, oh wait, she's missing like half of her hand. What is like the typical response? And how do you kind of deal with it or navigate?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, it used to really bother me that people would finally notice and they would stare. And now that I'm an adult, I realize that was not about me. That was them. Um, some respects, we're all still like cavemen. And when you look at someone and there's something different, your brain kind of goes into this mode of, I'm noticing there's something different about this person. What is it that's different about this person? And then you start thinking about, does it hurt them? Can they do this or that? And it's not about you at all.
Yeah,
So,
kind of going back to what you said earlier about the advice.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So
Yeah, and I tried to tell Victor that, but it's really hard. And when people notice, like, okay, here's an example. I love crafting, and I would really love to like teach different crafts to people, but I know that it would not feel good to me because they would notice my hand, and then they would stop listening to my instruction about whatever it was, and they would just be looking at my hand.
Yeah. Talk about the psychology of going into things. Yeah.
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 We have a friend that we had on the podcast a while ago, one of our first guests actually. And she has SMA, same as me, and she ended up becoming a professional dog trainer. And she was telling us this story of how um, she was helping someone train their dog, and it with her setup, they would pay her afterwards for her services. And the lady that she was helping refused to pay her just because she couldn't believe she had, this disability, and somehow it voided her, um, payment. So yeah, kind of crazy.
That's really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a similar thing we talked about a little bit on the last podcast, but like playing the piano, that was something that was really took a long, I've always been gravitating towards the piano and stuff, but I didn't really start getting serious about my YouTube channel until the last couple of years. But also I met like a standard because I was always worried that if people see that I'm playing with my foot, then they're going to tune out and not be listening to the music. But the whole point is the music.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I started talking to musicians and getting
Mm.
feedback that, I can tell that the music there has met the standard.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And when Victor was little and his dad would try to play the piano, Victor would literally, as soon as Kevin started playing, Victor would run over and literally push him off of the piano bench. I do it. I do it. And I would be like, Kevin, don't let him do that to you. You're playing. Victor can take a turn. But no, he just
Boys.
Yeah.
boys. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You wanna take a shot at a question? He's cooking. Let him cook.
Oh, no, it's just like because what I'm because a lot of it's kind of already been answered. Well, it's because like your childhood experience, that trauma of losing the hand, the way you go about your life, the anxiety, all that. How how much of that was a struggle or an influence in raising Victor? Or was it kind of like they just kind of like deflect off of him because he's just like, no, I'm gonna do it my way. It's just
Yeah.
like that part I find interesting. Like how because it's always like a crazy topic, like the parent-child dynamic, and like sometimes you don't realize that like our parents' anxiety sometimes becomes our anxiety, or like vice
Mhm.
versa.
Mm.
It's like and
We kind of
sometimes
absorb parental values, or
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Um, yeah. It that's I could talk about that for a really long time, but I kind of have to gather my thoughts about that.
Yeah.
But it did it had a really profound effect on my parenting, partly because it would, if an issue came up with where there was like a conflict with the kids, like they wanted to do this or that, or um, I would in that moment not really feel like a parent. I felt like a kid myself. So that doesn't always lead to very effective parenting. And it's looking back, it's a regret, but you you don't know what you don't know. So, I have to work on giving myself some grace about that. Otherwise, I'll just go
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a good friend of mine, and she told me that we should give each other a lot more grace because it wasn't a quote or anything. She just told me that, like, oh, well, it's the first time anyone's ever been alive currently, like at this moment. This is your
Hmm.
first time at like
Yeah.
life,
Hmm.
and we don't really get a second chance at it.
Unless you believe in
Reincarnation,
reincarnation.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is my first time.
Yeah.
I make a lot of mistakes. This is his
Yeah.
first time. And it's kind of like, oh, we should probably have more grace because it doesn't come
Hmm.
with instructions. All we really have to go off of is like what they taught us in school and like literature and like what we choose to engage with.
Hmm. Well, yeah. And back then I would be like, Lori, what in the hell is wrong with you? Why are you like that? That's just weird. So, and now I'm like, oh, now I get it. And, it would have been great to have known that back then, but even, when the kids were little, um, still the science wasn't really there about
Yeah.
trauma. And it was always kind of understood in my family that this was like a one-time thing, it happened, it's done, you're okay now, it's over, and everything is okay. And really, it turns out that wasn't the case. But, we didn't know.
Yeah.
My parents didn't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, kind of going into a separate field from raising Victor, were there any challenges, barriers you faced looking for employment, like with your hand, with regard to your hand, discrimination, people saying, no, you can't do this because you don't have a full hand?
Any jobs that ended up becoming more difficult or after the fact you didn't realize the challenge?
No, I don't. I I think I have been asked if my hand would be a barrier to anything
Yeah,
with a job, and I always just said no.
yeah, it's cool.
So, and you know what? I have to get back to work. Can
Okay.
we continue
Yeah,
another time?
definitely. We would
Another
love to
episode.
have you back on. Yeah, definitely. It's been so cool. Thank you for joining us and just sharing so much with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm happy to come back and talk more and have you ask more questions. You can ask me anything,
Yeah,
cool.
and I'll
appreciate it.
answer it to the best of my ability.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
No, thank you for like taking the time to like really think about your responses and like reflect with us and like share your experiences. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because it's like not only helpful to us, but just like anybody
Who's
that comes
listening?
across it.
Yeah.
Because remember, this is like our first time and like listening to you, people might not realize, oh, I guess there is a correlation there.
Hmm.
Like, oh, body keeps a score. Maybe I'll check that out.
Yeah.
And it's always good.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's a really amazing and intense book. And, it covers a range, like from Vietnam veterans to people with addiction issues, um, people who survived the Holocaust, you know, all kinds of stuff like that.
It's
Uh,
cool. Awesome.
Well, thank you very
Oh,
much, Lauren.
all right. Thank you guys. And maybe if we do it again, we'll have to do it when I'm not supposed to be back at work from my lunch break.
Oh,
Yeah.
no worries.
No worries. Yeah, whenever. We had some trouble scheduling, I know. We kept
But
having
yeah, we've rescheduled
mornings
a
pop up.
bazillion times,
Yeah.
but yeah, I really admire that you're doing this podcast. And when Victor told me about it, I was really excited and keep up the good work.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
All
Finally,
right.
now we can talk about girls. No.
Yes. And then there were three.
And there
Yes.
were three. Well, that was a lovely conversation. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was cool. Your mom's cool.
Yeah, well, it's just, I think they're very important topics that people don't really think about because, like, Dominic and I use a term called white knuckling, like where traumatic events or things just happen and we just kind of like grip really hard and just like grip through it. Because, like, older generations, it's just like, oh, well, stop being like a pussy, stop doing this. It's
Stop being a snowflake.
yeah, and then like them not realizing that. And then they like hide that trauma or like they try to shelf it away, but you can't really do that and it affects I don't know, it's crazy. It is a wild topic.
Yeah. So you had said something along the lines of our last conversation, about going into the grocery store and people seeing you as a person with one arm. And to anybody else, that made it seem like a perfectly normal thing to say. But me being the um, overthinker that I am, overanalyzer, I thought, well, he could have chosen to say that people view him as a person with one arm missing instead of just with one arm. So
Yeah.
my question here is like, was that intentional? Because I think this kind of, dives into more of the psychology of your understanding of your differences. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is Yeah, it's interesting to dive into the semantics, and it is possible that it's just, how I chose to phrase it.
Yeah.
But when I do kind of dissect that, I can tell you for sure that in my mind, to say that I have one arm versus I am missing an arm, there's a negativity on that second one because
Mhm.
missing, lost, don't have, there's that negative connotation. And then it leads the door for, oh, well, what happened? Why is that? Versus, um, if you look at how to be the key to gratitude, how do you be grateful? You account for what you have. So I
Yeah.
have one arm. I don't want to define myself immediately by what I don't have. I want to define myself immediately by what I do have, which is one arm, versus immediately calling out, I am missing an arm. Why would I start with what I don't have?
Yeah.
So I think that it's an interesting, catching that. I feel like in the moment it's just, the words that I happen to choose, but as I dissect it, and if I do want to pick my words carefully, that is the route that I would go. Keep things kind of in that positive,
Yeah.
that light, yeah, like that. Yeah.
I was telling Uriel, my memory on the subject is very spotty, but I remember during my communication courses learning about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. And to my memory, which again could be spotty,
Mhm.
as I recall, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis states something along the lines of a culture and its language will be reflective of its environment. In
Oh,
other
sure.
words,
Oh, yeah.
the way you communicate, the words in your language
Mhm.
are dictated by your environment,
Yep.
your way of life. That's why I think it's the Inuit people that have literally hundreds of words for snow
Hmm.
because of being, I think they're in Alaska.
Sure.
And it's interesting when you apply that to disability. And this was always the stuff that I got interested in when I was doing my research courses, um, just how communication affects our disability and how our disability affects our communication.
Yeah, that's interesting because, and I'm aware of that this concept, this idea, and I don't know exactly where it comes from for me on this next idea, but I constantly frame things in a we. So if I do, some project for somebody, some IT thing, and I'm at their house and stuff like that, and I did everything by myself, it is always like, well, this is what we did. And everything is always framed in like the unit.
Yeah.
But to an extent we're in it together. If I had to look into the psychology of that, and take a quick stab at it, a quick guess, I would say probably that there's a lot of loneliness and isolation with, having a disability, having one arm, stuff like that. There is not a lot of we in my individual experience. So I don't want to do that with other people. I want to kind of give what I didn't have in that kind of form where it's like, hey, here's this challenge. We are solving this together. It doesn't matter if I do all the work. I mean, I'm here to help you. So we are in this together as a unit. Um,
Okay.
and I feel like, some of my own stuff, my surgery, my chronic pain, stuff like that, I feel like I'm really lacking in that area because I go to the doctor and it doesn't feel like they are helping me. It's they are doing it's I don't feel that we unit when I'm in those rooms. It's very
Mm,
clinical in nature and I feel like a
Yeah.
number and that's a big frustration I have. I mean, we could really dive into that topic if we want to.
uh,
Um, but I'm just not, unfortunately, in my case, I'm just not another patient. There's nuances there. It takes you got to take a closer look. You got to do a deeper dive,
yeah.
because that's my lived experience. I make sure to try to take the opposite approach with clients I work with, or really any relationship I approach.
What- So maybe this is me like reaching, but because of the one arm and the assistance and the friendships and all that, and like all that communicative, like the we and like working with other people, do you think having one arm and sometimes receiving assistance, even when you don't, how do I word, when you need it, do you think that also contributes to the we part as well? Like whether it be like family, friends, there's always like not that you need the help, but just like the fact that like other people are there to
Sure.
help.
Yeah, and it may not, I think that's just kind of how our family unit has been. My dad has always been somebody who um wants to help you in anything you're doing, regardless. Like he just, talk about a backseat driver. But anyway, he's always wanting to give his input or things like that. Same thing with music. He'll want to chime in, and I appreciate that. I like that, and I'm very similar. If I feel like I have something to add, a value, something like that, I'm going to want to. And so, yeah, when I'm around people and when I'm around my family, it is a lot of we, um, in our, the way we talk and the way we act and the way, uh,
I see.
we interact with each other. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So, okay, and since you mentioned it, I do want to talk a bit about the chronic pain stemming from
Yeah.
your spinal fusion. I think we have
A
very,
shared
I was
experience.
gonna say, very different
Yeah.
experience,
Oh,
yet with the same kind of parallels in how we feel, um, regarding that depression and um fighting through those, like dark feelings and dark thoughts. Uh, so I guess I'll just start by asking, how old were you when you had your fusion, and what was that experience like?
Yeah. And, we'll get to the brighter side after all this, but we may get, into a heavier topic.
Yeah.
I was 17. This was in 2013 that I had the surgery, and
Okay.
I was basically like I was like a hypochondriac before my surgery. I always thought I had some kind of ailment, and I was very paranoid about a lot of different things. I had this whole thing with medication. I didn't want to take medication. Tylenol would give me give me a panic attack. A lot of that stems from when my grandfather died when I was young, and that just kind of spiraled me into this crazy paranoia, OCD, just a bad deal. But anyway, so now I'm facing a real medical issue to the point where when I had my surgery, it was almost like an emergency. I was doing x-rays every so often. And then the period between two x-rays, there was a substantial increase in my scoliosis that I had, like a ridiculous, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like an order of magnitude sudden change where they basically scheduled like I had that x-ray like on a Friday and my surgery was scheduled on a Monday. It was like
Wow.
oh
real
wow.
quick.
Yeah.
And I had to come to terms with a lot of things very quickly. I had all these aspirations. For example, I wanted to do the Appalachian Trail, and so a lot of those kinds of future dreams were like instantly shattered. And then I was thinking about the long-term repercussions. But the thing right in front of me was I have to go and deal with a big medical event where I was having trouble taking Tylenol, and now I have to be put under anesthesia for 8 hours and go through like a full-blown surgery and stuff like that. I mean, I just resigned to the fact that I was just going to die in the surgery. Like that was just easier to wrap my head around instead of like all of the what was going to happen. And let's see if I can make this quick tangent. I was so nervous about my surgery, and one of the ways I was going to preoccupy myself was and keep myself sane was I thought of something really funny to say when I woke up for anesthesia. One, I didn't want to embarrass myself because a lot of people, all those videos of people going to the dentist's office, I was like, I don't
Yeah.
want that to be me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to say something really funny, and so I practiced. I thought of it. When I'd wake up in the morning, I'd say this thing, and I had it, and I was like, this is going to be, if I survive this thing, this is going to be hilarious. So I do the surgery, which coincidentally, when I actually, the day of the surgery, as soon as I went through those doors, I was not nervous. I was like, I'm cool. That was kind of interesting. Anyway, so I finally wake up from the surgery and I'm groggy. I can barely tell what's going on, but I'm just cognitive enough to know I'm awake and the surgery has been done. I'm going to be able to do it. I'm going to be able to say my funny thing. So the nurse comes in, she comes up to me and she says, "Oh, Victor, how are you feeling?" And I said, "I can't feel my left arm." And she says, "You've already said that." It's like, oh man. I probably
Oh.
said it like 50 times by that point.
In your
Uh,
sleep, I love
just over and over and over. Oh man.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
but
But
anyway, so after my surgery, I remember when I got up, I immediately could tell something was not quite right. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and the curvature in my back was really severe. I mean, they did torque my body like crazy, but I was kind of under the impression, and maybe I was naive that I'd just be like fixed,
yeah.
and like I'd have a perfectly straight spine. And they did an X-ray that day, and I remember looking at the X-ray and seeing how curved the top above where the rods are, how much curvature there still was.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what any of that kind of meant other than, wow, that's crazy. They also had me walk on that first day, and that was one of the worst painful experiences I've
Oh,
ever had.
Oh God.
Um, and but where the rods stop, it's in my thoracic spine, T4, if that matters to anybody.
Oh wow.
But there's a curvature over that. So my head is not centered over my spine, over where that correction stops. So there's a lot of leverage on where my spine doesn't move and then where my spine can move. And so I have like a form of arthritis in my upper back, and I just have this really horrible, torquey, leveragey thing that's going on in my upper back, and it causes me uh, a lot of pain. And then I also have a lot of pain in my lower back. So they went from T4 to L4, and it's yes, two screws in every vertebrae all the way down.
yeah,
And I remember, 3 months in, it was still hurting, and then 6 months in, it was still hurting, and then like a year in, it was still hurting, and it was like this cannot be right. Something is wrong. And I
yeah,
go back to the doctor, and they weren't quite sure on. I just wasn't getting a lot of answers, and then I started going to other doctors. I went to UCLA, and I went to Stanford, and I went to Irvine, and I went some other places, and they'd be all excited about trying to help me, but then after I do all their expensive tests and everything, they'd come back and say, hey, things look kind of stable, and we don't really want to do anything and make things worse. But I heard from one doctor uh, that one at that point the damage was kind of done. It would be hard to go back in because one, it's so far up in the spine that people don't want to work up there
yeah,
because you'd have to, if they wanted to add or do any more corrections, you're going into your cervical spine, into your neck, and then that's a whole nother ball game. But also bones have started to heal over the hardware, and then trying to get to the hardware would be a whole pain. Um, but also some doctors just they don't want to go in after somebody else's work, and like
mhm,
acknowledge that there was a problem. And my perspective was the doctors who did their surgery originally, my anatomy is a little different, and so I don't think anybody did anything malicious or anything like that. Or they didn't, that they screw it up or anything like that. It's just, uh, you know, who could have known that my anatomy was so different and, or that their things could have ended up the way they were.
yeah,
Um, but and then there's a whole thing with health insurance that we could get into, which is, they try to get me on medications, and then the only medications they would allow were like opioids and stuff. So I was on that for years, and that was frustrating because I didn't like that, and it would give me panic attacks. And
I can imagine like being afraid to take Tylenol and all of a sudden
Oh yeah.
they give you opioids. Like,
oh
oh,
yeah, I mean it was terrible. I mean it was like a battle to take. I would have to be feeling like I was going to die to take it early on, and it was rough. And my pain physicians, there's some concerns about like addiction and dependency. And while there was like a chemical dependence over time, just when you take it for years, um, I felt like addiction was off the table because I would purposely stop taking it all the time just to kind of gauge where things were because I don't want to mask a symptom. I want to know. It's like how much. And
yeah,
then when I lost my insurance, I just stopped at cold turkey because it's like I'm not gonna. The worst thing that I experienced was my insurance would cancel my medication like every other month, and I would run out because I wasn't stockpiling it because I needed it, and then so I'd go like a week with nothing, and it would be a horrible experience. And then you're going through withdrawal as well, and then you get back on it, and then there's just this uncertainty with that. And we try to do other procedures like nerve blocks, and then the insurance would not allow that kind of stuff. Um, and so there's this whole other, so not only is the chronic pain aspect just suck and adds to a depressive state, but then there is this psychological thing, which is these ups and downs. I go to the doctors to try to get help, and it feels like I'm making progress, and then something happens, and then the wind is just out from your sails, and so deflated, so dejected, and I would just have these up and downs. And even recently, I had something like that similarly, which was, supposed to get an MRI, and there's some scheduling mishap, and then um, they kind of booted me and I have to go through the whole process again. I just don't feel like getting on that horse again. It's like,
yeah,
it's so tiring to be up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
And, it's a hard thing to not think about, wow, it's been 10 years already. What could another 10 years look like?
yeah,
And what happens when I start naturally aging? I know people who are in their 30s. I'm 29. People who are in their 30s complaining about their back hurting or in their 40s complaining about their back hurting. It's like, well, if that's just from age, what it's going to be like when I, get to that
yeah,
point. And,
Yeah.
like I said earlier, my pain kind of increases over time, over the years in stages. And recently my back has been hurting a little more than usual. And I'm, a little worried. Is this the next stage, or is this just something that's, maybe I aggravated it lately and it's just, having a short-term problem. I don't know, but that kind of stuff is scary because I know someday I won't be able to play the piano the same way that I do now, or I won't be able to be as active as I can, or, any number of things. And it's hard to have to make those compromises against what I want to do and what I want to do later, and what I can do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets exceptionally difficult, especially I know when like reaching out for help because not everybody's gonna fully understand your circumstances, and sometimes they say stuff that like are kind of helpful at the time, but like it's kind of hard to accept. It's like, oh, well, just keep playing, or just maybe have you tried this? And it's kind of like, yes, yeah, yeah, and it's like kind of like drags on you a little bit.
Well, as I'm sure
Yeah,
you're aware, people oftentimes, more than not, have good intentions
yeah,
with what they say or advice they may give. It's just hard to understand fully what somebody else is going through.
yeah, and it's a lot to process for some, especially if someone's not ready to hear that, and they don't have like much experience with it. It's kind of like uh, people have good intentions and they want to help, but they're not sure how to like navigate or
Hmm.
like give advice, which is perfectly fine because like how does one give advice? You know,
Yeah.
that stuff's crazy, right?
And to touch on the ups and downs you experienced that you mentioned, you know, when I had my spinal fusion, um, I was 13 and uh, the surgery itself went great. Pain, I've never had pain in my back after my surgery. And I believe I had the same, um, you know, uh, what do I want to call it? The same length of the fusion from T4 to lower lumbar. And so I've always been grateful for that I never had any real issues with back pain. I do have moments where like I'll bend weird or I'll move suddenly weird and I'll get like a sharp pain in my
Yeah,
back and I'm like
tweaks.
and
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, oh, it's over. Like
Oh yeah.
the nail is sticking out and it's poking my liver or something and
Uh,
it's just over. Then it goes away and yeah. But to speak more on the ups and downs, it's a real thing and it's hard to in the moment that they're happening, uh, compartmentalize everything. And as you said, realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Because the thing about ups and downs is they're up and down. It's not like a straight linear thing where you realize at some point I'm gonna be in the all clear again, in the all good zone. Um,
Well, let me take you through kind of to my light in the end of the tunnel, but we're gonna drag through the mud again real quick,
yeah,
yeah,
that's fine.
which
Yeah,
is
share.
um, because I think it's important to express what this pain actually is, because I don't want to dismiss it. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, you just do these easy things and then, pain is irrelevant in your life, or, because, coping with pain, it is specific, it's individualized. There is no one size fits all. Um, and for me, I don't externalize my pain. Right now sitting here, I'd probably say like I hate the scale, but let's say, it's like a 6 out of 10. And that's like, a fairly normal kind of thing. It just hurts all the time. And then I have these flare ups that can be, a 10 out of 10, it could be 11, it could be what you said. There's a nail sticking out of my back right now. I guarantee it. I don't care if you say it looks normal. I'm
yeah,
bleeding internally. This is like, I feel like I got hit by a bus. If in fact, getting hit by a bus would probably fix the problem. So, and I have those periods, but a lot of times those happen in the middle of the night when there's nobody around. And that's psychologically very challenging because I present myself in front of people. I'm very capable. Everybody talks about my achievements and how great I am and all that kind of stuff. And that affects me because I see this other side of that where I feel so helpless, so worthless, so just I can't do anything. And and I don't want to burden people with the pain that I experience too. I mean, it wouldn't do anything for me if I was hurting in front of people because one, they're not going to know how to respond. And back pain is it's such a different beast. I've talked to a lot of people who've gone through different kinds of chronic pain, and back pain is just one of those that you don't know until you know it. Maybe you have sciatica or something like that, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, I get it. Why? Unfortunately, there are people who kill themselves because of the chronic pain, and
Yeah.
I can see it. I know how you can get into that headspace. Um, and it's wild to me that, well, one, that the brain doesn't have a way to adapt to pain that way. Like the fact that you can be pushed that way. Your brain has so many survival mechanisms, except for like extreme pain. Wild. Anyway. Um,
My one beef with the changelog, the patch notes.
yes, yes, please. We need a firmware update. But yeah, so dealing with pain late at night and stuff is really psychologically challenging. And then having pain attributed to things like my hobbies, like playing the piano. I know if I play the piano too long, I'm gonna hurt later. And that kind of stuff is really challenging because um, I'd love to say, well, my hobbies help. Well, I'm having to start to compromise on how long I want to play the piano and how long it's going to be helpful versus when it's no longer helpful, when it's actually degenerative, when it's regressive to what I'm dealing with. The positive, and I think the light is the end of the tunnel, is I like and I always appreciated lived experiences because then it does put me in a better position to help other people, to talk, to have these kinds of conversations, because that is really the only way to, I don't know, get to the other side, is to feel heard, to feel like there's somebody else going through it. And maybe they may not have the answer, but you don't feel alone. And I think that's the worst part about all that. And again, I'm coming back to that middle of the night thing. The reason that's so bad is because you're alone. There's nobody there. And um, you feel alone. You feel lonely. I think we talked about feeling alone in the last podcast. But either way, that is like the one kind of, I don't know if I want to say positive, but it's something that I carry with me is, and how I operate just generally in life is I'm very attuned to that. I'm very aware of that. And I operate with my relationships, with my friends, with family and stuff like that to make sure that people around me do not feel alone, that they feel heard, that I'm actually genuinely caring, that my relationship with people is the furthest thing from clinical. I want to know you. I want to be invested in you, be and caring and stuff like that. It can be emotionally taxing. I may not have like the largest friend base because of that. I kind of hone in on, the inner circle, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, but once you're in, you're in. And I don't know.
Hmm.
I relate to that 100%. I was
Yeah.
talking to Uriel about that yesterday.
Yeah. Funny enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just like, you know what? I feel like sometimes I just give too much to people of me, emotionally, socially, and it can be draining. And it's really important to navigate and think about the people that you choose to give that energy to, right?
Yeah, I think
Because,
like we're both like open books and we both like are like anti-gatekeep and all that. So like we just kind of like spill everything out. It's just like,
yeah,
oh, you need help with that. You need advice on this? Sure, I'll tell you what I know.
yeah,
It's like
like
always.
always eager to help, always
Yeah.
Yes.
eager to, you know, just be an ear for somebody. And I think it's important to, with that in mind, to, as we talked about earlier, be graceful, give grace to yourself,
Yeah, well,
Um,
it's like because I've made my mistakes and I know how I feel.
mhm.
And so I'm starting to feel I'm starting to sound like an uncle, like an old wise man. But it's like, well, anything I could do to like pass on any advice to anybody. Maybe not. Maybe most people will shrug it off. But for the couple people that do listen, that do retain the information, I hope
For
I've helped.
our 12 listeners.
Yeah, well, I hope I've helped.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
On
Because
that kind of idea, I mean, I put a lot of weight into giving pretty much everything I have, like especially knowledge, my brain, stuff like that. What people, I'm touted as a know-it-all, and like, I'm always known for my facts and trivia and stuff. I'm always, mentoring people, if you will. But it's because, that information is useless to hoard it, or
Yeah.
lived experiences, all that stuff. I want to give it a one because, tomorrow's never guaranteed. So why hold on to that kind of stuff? Um, but two, that's where I think the most amount of value. I mean, otherwise, yeah, sitting around at 3 in the morning, hurting in pain means absolutely nothing if I don't make anything out of it. And it
Yeah.
sucks that that's my experience that, because I didn't choose that. There's, well, here's a good one. Early on after my surgery, the things that would run through my head is here I'm laying here. I have one arm that I didn't ask for, and I have, some other life things going on. And then on top of all of this, it hurts. And that was a really hard thing to wrap my head around. But there's this outward bound quote. I don't know if I already mentioned, but I was really interested in doing the Appalachian Trail. And that was one of my dreams that were instantly shattered. But there's this outward bound quote that's very popular on the Appalachian Trail. And the quote is, you can be cold, wet, and miserable, or just cold and wet. And that is something that has really stuck with me. And that kind of changed my way of where, yeah, it's going to hurt. It's going to suck. But you get to choose how miserable you're going to be. You can't change the weather, but you can change your attitude, that kind of thing. And, it's
Yeah.
easy enough to say this right now, because it's not 3 in the morning. I'm not laying in bed, in a horrible pain and agony. Because I guarantee you, in the middle of the night, I will have somewhat of a different attitude and I will be saying some different things.
Mhm.
But there are, meditations, there are things to try to, get me to realize, things are temporary, things are impermanent. This pain will pass, all that kind of stuff will pass. There'll be, enough good times to make stuff worth it, regardless of how miserable it may seem. Um, but it really is, it's a mindset thing, and to know that you can survive it. What also helps is knowing that at any time you have that choice, you can pick the choice to make it, the next day, to keep going and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
um, while that sounds scary and maybe a little bit morbid, it's important to know that is um, you have that. It's almost freeing in that way. You
Yeah.
get to. You're not forced to survive for what? No, you get to do it. You want to do it.
I'm
It's really cool because like cross-culturally, there's a lot of similar like conclusions
mm,
that a lot of people have come up like you can control your attitude, how you go about things. You
mm,
could choose to be like just like cold and wet instead of miserable. It's like reoccurring like things like cross-culturally.
yeah.
So it's kind of like a humanity, like a shared human experience, a through line, which I think is really cool,
I
you know.
I'm a big fan of the myth of Sisyphus. And for those that are unfamiliar, it's an ancient story about a king of antiquity that essentially I think has an affair with a god's wife or something crazy. Sleeps with the god's wife, and as his punishment, he's forced to push a boulder up the incline of a hill, and no matter what he does, no matter how hard he tries to push the boulder to the top of the hill, the boulder inevitably falls back down, and he's forced for an eternity to go back down, push the boulder back up, and do this over.
Yeah.
And that's it's often used as an allegory for looking at, struggles in life, and it's something I've always related to just because the nature of my disability, of my disease, has always been inevitable to me. Like I will die because of SMA, and there's nothing I can do about that. But what I can do is make the decision to keep pushing that boulder up.
Mhm.
And that's that's a power like in and of itself, you know? I can make the decision to live my life despite knowing that my life will end. So,
I think, this is something you can choose to leave in, this kind of thing. But well, first, I recently got engaged. That's the whole thing. But
I
yes,
Congratulations.
my
Yeah.
that was a big conversation with um, my fiance when we were dating at the time, was trying to explain what this pain was, because it's like, I don't know how to prepare you for this until you see it, because me walking around here, I'll move around and I'll do some things here, but like again, when it's bad, and it's a whole thing. And but another thing was, I've kind of come to terms with, not that I have, I want to be careful how I say this. I do know that it would be naive to think that uh, I'm just going to be fine, and like, I'll be at 80 years old and all those kinds of things. there could be any number of complications, medical things and stuff like that with um, my situation. But also, again, we kind of touched on it with chronic pain. Chronic pain can kill people, and it can, and I know that that is something that could happen, and it's a hard thing to come to terms with, to know that pain can get that bad. But it was also some, I was planning, I'm planning on marrying this woman, so I wanted to explain to her, it's like, you got to know that that is something, it's not anybody's fault or anything like that, but that's something to realize, that that is how bad this pain is.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to get across to people, because again, for the most part, people don't see it. I mean, she's seen it now, and so she is aware, and she knows how to handle it, and has been just a game changer in this whole dynamic. Um, but it's one of those things that I think that is not well talked about enough. When you're getting to support groups, it's talked about all the time. So yeah, which is great.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's as socially acceptable um, to talk about that stuff, because it's considered, um, I don't know, there's a lot of taboos and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of lack of resources in that kind of area. And
Yeah,
um,
it's hard to bring up, especially for a group of people that might feel that way or might be further along or closer to that darkness. So some people are afraid to bring it up in case they like trigger someone else, but it's like I think it is a very important conversation to have regardless, with like either people that have experienced or are closer to it or further away from it.
Yeah.
But it's just like when you're like kind of like in like well in a group setting, it's kind of like I feel like I feel like everybody there is aware of it, but they're kind of like afraid to bring it up because they know how they feel about it, and they're not sure if what they'll say will either help trigger or hurt someone else that's in that same place.
sure.
Mhm.
And that like could be like, but I think it is very important to talk about. And it's like finding the right people, like even just like when you're with your support group, maybe like one on one, just like ask them like, yo, you ever feel like this? Or like like that. And like kind of like talking to like the group leader or whatever, seeing like what we can arrange, like, what we can do to like approach that topic. So maybe we can find some like some healing or some like help in that,
Mhm.
I think. You know, because yeah, I do agree there is like some level of taboo behind it, but sometimes that could just be every individual member at that group kind of afraid to bring it up,
Sure. Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar thing in therapy, and it was a good, barrier to cross. But, I went through the whole thing where, you bring anything like that up, and then you start having to fill out the forms and blah blah blah, and the therapist gets all concerned and all that stuff. It's like, no, it's like I'm not saying I'm planning anything like that. It's like, I'm just saying, I want to paint out what I see as, I don't want to be naive, and I want to, explain how bad this pain can be.
Yeah.
And, the therapist that I was seeing is. Uh, I think did a good job, helping navigate this stuff and finding out, where the line is so we can toe it and not, get ourselves in trouble, that kind of thing. But it is important to talk about, because it is a reality. I explained this way to somebody else, which was, I am not in danger sitting with you right now at 1:30 in the afternoon, because I'm in my best cognitive state. I got a lot going on, stuff like that. When I'm 3 in the morning and I have barely slept, and I basically, I'm not in a sober mind like that, because I'm super tired, I'm hurting and stuff like that. That is the person who has to overcome that pain. And that's a
Right.
much difficult, harder battle, because
Yeah.
that mindset is not the one who can necessarily run through a bunch of logical conclusions on how to, or whatever it is. So that's why it's important to have, these meditations or some other systems or plans, or, whatever it is, other support or resources, another person, stuff like that around. Um, because, there's these external forces. And
Mhm.
again, it's important discussions to have. And it's unfortunate that there is such a taboo, because, um, it's something that comes with that territory.
Yeah.
Not just chronic pain, but there's other things, chronic illness and disabilities and any number of things. You got to be able to talk about it because when these demons come up, they come up usually when you're not in your best fighting stance. You
Yeah.
get
Yeah, like
blindsided, and then what are you going to do? So you kind of need that background automatic response.
yeah, it is just like I don't know, experiencing life, just like getting to talk to other people. I was telling Dominic, I made friends with a war vet, but he didn't see any active combat. He was 24, I believe, and said like terrible family life, whatever, and he only ever viewed himself as a soldier. Like I will always be a soldier. I'm going to die a soldier. I'm like a good for nothing. That's all I'm good for. And he fought Russia in the Ukrainian war for a year and he came back very mentally unwell. And I like had the opportunity to have a lot of like similar conversations like this with him and like how he manages it and all this and it's like pain comes in a lot of different forms. And it's like I think it's very important and like I get choked up about it because I wouldn't want anybody to like harm themselves. But
Yeah.
also can't be naive to like their pain. And it's like you're in a position where what can I say? What can I do? What can I, like
Hmm.
how can I help or like what should I say? It's very like difficult at times,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like
Mhm.
so there's also like that other side of it. It's just like, oh, you have all these loved ones, but
Yeah,
like,
and again, there's not a one size fits all on how you approach or handle these situations because some people
yeah,
have contentness with, or maybe there's a religious aspect that helps,
yeah,
get them across the line, or maybe it's defining contentness in any individual moment. That's definitely the way I kind of approach things is I want to feel that I'm content at any given time and that, what I do to contribute and stuff. I try not to have a lot of long-term aspirations. I usually I'm satisfied with any current state and anything else I will
mhm,
have a couple life achievements and then everything after that is uh you know the cherry on top. um but it's important for me in my state is to have a base level of contentness and always be able to. I don't want to set high goals because I don't want to run a scenario where I can no longer meet that goal when the time
Yeah.
comes. Like, I want to do some 3 hour long concert. And then I get to that point where I get that opportunity and realize, oh, I can't do it because of and then needlessly disappoint myself versus I'm content every time I sit in front of my piano, regardless of the amount of time. I'm content. And
yeah,
that is more important. When I post something on YouTube and get my music out there, that's important. I've contributed and that matters. And I kind of do this exercise every day at the end of the day. I feel like, did I do something that mattered to me, to other people? And for the most part, the answer is yes, because that's how I like to live my life. Um, and that kind of stuff. I mean, that would be my light at the end of the tunnel is no matter what, I'm always doing what I can to matter to myself, to other people and stuff like that.
yeah,
And that's kind of what gets me um, up in the morning, other than like an overwhelming sense of responsibility for all the other stuff I have to do.
yeah,
Um,
Yep. I
but it
feel that.
is, the small ways that I can contribute, like my YouTube stuff. Yeah, I'll get, sometimes I'll get tens of thousands of views um, but I'm doing that stuff, for me, and then maybe like a handful of people that I know is going to have a deep impact too. It'll resonate with a bunch of people, and again, that would be the cherry on top kind of thing. But my specific goal in mind there is like to affect, these handful of people that, I really think is going to get something out of it or connect with or,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
I think
yeah.
that's
Perfectly healthy, realistic, and I
yeah.
think appropriate way to set goals. And I think that's very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like I have a similar problem where it's like, well, we talk about this. It's so hard for me to see long term, especially with how crazy things are. So it's like, and you're always telling me to just kind of focus on like the now and like the next week and like to like almost like doing it like one step at a time,
Yeah.
kind of like setting like a small goal. I'll do that and then I'll get to it. And then it's like definitely like, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's important.
And I think it's the perfect time to plug your YouTube channel and your website.
Oh, yeah.
Where can the people find you, Victor?
Yeah, my website, victormcconnell.com. And then you can also find me on YouTube just by searching Victor McConnell or One-Handed Piano. Basically, anything one-arm related, I'll probably show up. One-Arm Freak for my gaming kind of stuff. But yeah, most of my stuff is just ending up under my Victor McConnell website or Victor McConnell YouTube channel.
It's been super fun, Victor. Just like always, we
Yeah.
we like talking to you, and
Yeah.
think we get along well.
Yeah.
And yeah, don't forget VictorMcConnell.com, Victor McConnell on YouTube, One Armed Freak on YouTube for gaming content, all that good stuff, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me on again, and I'm sure there'll be yet another appearance at some point.
Yes.
Definitely would look forward to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Always a pleasure.
And I will be queuing up that Return of the King meme.
Yes.
Oh yeah. You have the little token, the little doo-doo. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right. If you liked what we had to say today, please leave us that rating, a nice little review on Apple Podcasts.
Caps. Yeah.
And yeah, be sure to share with your friends and family. If you're not already, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at The Disability Myth, all one word. And peace and love. May the force be with you.
Bye.